So I'm hanging out in Columbus with Hot Vegan Eats.
This is a world premiere. This is a world.
And it's me here. So check it out, guys. I'm here in Columbus with Ryne, who some of you may recognize from Hot Vegan Eats. So first of all, I'm going to ask you, what about that title? What about that name for your channel?
Honestly, I just Googled and excuse me. I was just trying to find a website, because it's also a website. I wanted to have a website that nobody had. Because originally it was plant-based living.
What's been up?
I haven't been posting in a while, I apologize. I quit my job. I was a party chef at a non-vegan restaurant. It was just kind of wearing on me. I was constantly cooking meat. And yeah, I just kind of was fed up, had enough with it, and decided to quit. Now I work part-time at a raw vegan restaurant.
Okay.
Usually only 1 or 2 days a week, and the majority of the other time I bartend. So, just fun. I like being in front of people. Can't complain.
Wow. That must, I don't know. You know, we've had a few conversations, and we've actually, I don't want to say that we've butted heads a few times, but there have been some like sort of finer points about being vegan where I think we've not seen 100% eye to eye, or I feel like there are some things that I've said about veganism that have sort of set off alarms for you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, not really butt heads like all the drama channels do. We actually physically fighting. But the whole like dietary, environmental, and ethical vegan, like my video was like, why does it matter? Like if you come to veganism through any one of those channels. And I think you brought up a very good point, was you could be a dietary vegan, but you still wear a leather coat. And that I completely agree. But I don't think an environmental vegan would be okay wearing a leather coat.
There's energy in the vegan community that I think makes this, especially on YouTube, it makes it a hostile environment. And so it's not hard to imagine that someone's opinions may really be, judgments. And, so you have like, I feel like almost people getting into these petty squabbles. One, petty squabbles about what it means to be a real vegan, right? And so you have people on their guard constantly because they're, they don't want to be challenged. Nobody wants to be, I don't want to be challenged. Not in that way, not over something stupid like, did you have honey one time? Because as far as I'm concerned, I've eaten meat most of my life.
I don't think it's an overnight thing. I think a lot of people become vegetarian, mostly vegetarian, slightly vegan, and it's not this like, yeah, it doesn't just happen overnight. I was vegetarian for a very long time, and I feel like when people attack other people for not being 100% vegan or not being vegan enough, I think that's just absurd. I think it's insane. Like, how are you going to convince people to become more vegan or to become vegan if you have this all or nothing mentality?
What role do you think that sense of not having enough to do, you're not having enough issues to focus on, like real issues of one's own, how might that lead someone to focusing on like the more petty aspects of veganism, like, is this person vegan enough, or are these person's ethics enough in line?
Well, I think privilege definitely plays a huge role. I mean, not for everybody. There's definitely going to be people who are very privileged. I come from a very privileged background. But I do think a lot of people that come from very privileged backgrounds who really they don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. They already have a very good job, comfortable living. I feel like they get this like tunnel vision of, if you aren't vegan, what's wrong with you? Not even taking into account like that how you were raised, how you grew up, the fact that like having meat at a meal was something very special and unique that you didn't get all the time. I mean, that's going to play a huge role.
It's really interesting. The other thing you talked about in the places where you've worked, that because I hear a lot about how veganism is a white people's thing.
Yes.
And of course, he's like not proving any points, right? Okay, so you've been working, you've been working in these places that sell, that offer vegan options. And, you were telling me that you were not necessarily surprised, but that who comes in and what they ask for may not match up with this idea that, veganism or even vegetarianism is a thing specifically for people who identify as white, or people who can be identified as white.
But I noticed a very disproportionate amount, and I was asking Reg about this. I noticed a very disproportionate amount of black people coming in asking about, well, one, coming into my raw vegan restaurant, and two, coming into the non-vegan restaurant asking about vegan vegetarian options.
Right, so you're saying that African Americans are showing up and asking for these things.
Yes, and I was asking Reg, why do you think that is? And I have some ideas of my own, but
I'd love to hear what you think.
I thought it's Gary Yourofsky talks about this when he's on a news station in Israel, like why do Jews relate so much to veganism?
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about that he thinks that they were in a situation where they were subjugated and under just total and complete discrimination, that they're more able to relate to the plight and suffering of animals. And I think it's something similar with African Americans, that you come up from such a different background, and it's much more relatable.
Right. It's interesting because I can't say that that's not true. I mean, I don't know, and it may be offensive to some people, like you, like not being Jewish and you not being African American, even trying to like figure out the psychology of people who are from this different background. But I think the exercise is useful because we're not just trying to. I'm not just trying to have African Americans think about where their food comes from. I want anyone that I meet to think about where their food comes from. And I want to be able to think about the sensitivities of people from all different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't necessarily say to someone who was Jewish, I wouldn't necessarily bring up the Holocaust. I think that might be, that would be offensive because it's not, I don't know what that experience was. I don't know what it feels like to come from a people who went through that particular type of violence. But it would be useful to me to know that that person might be more susceptible to the message because of it. Mm-hmm. Not that I would ever like bring it up and say, I'm talking to you because of this, but to know that I have an audience that might be more open because they might understand it. And then just to see. And so when it comes to African Americans, I do think, like all weekend, since yesterday when I got to Ohio, I'm here for this county fair, and the whole thing is about, food on display, but the big part of it is like they're showing these animals. They're in this contest, right? And the animals that win are going to be sold and they're going to be slaughtered. They're all going to be sold, right? Just the fact that they were in this competition makes that animal to someone more valuable as a food item. And I can't help but think about, wow, there was a time when this was done with people. And that those people happen to be Africans, and that they're ancestors of mine does probably have an impact. But I think greater than that, on a more conscious level, I think it's that as African Americans, we know that our diet has been so bad for so long. because we were eating the food that we were given during slavery, which was the worst of the worst, that using, African ingenuity, people were able to make taste good, so good that now people who aren't Africans eat that food and think of that food as like delicious, right? But taking that food and making it taste good and then having that food become the staple of the African diet, and it's, food that's really bad for you. It's like, the scraps from pigs, right? It's the intestines. It's all of the parts of the animal that were thrown aside. And that has been the center of the African American diet for, hundreds of years now. And I think Africans are starting to realize that we're killing ourselves with this diet. And so I think that the vegan diet and the vegetarian diet, I'm going to say the vegan diet is probably closer to the diet that people had in Africa before slavery. Because it's a country that's rich with natural resources. And you could walk outside and eat whatever, there was food everywhere.
I lived in Africa, right?
I didn't know you lived in Africa.
Yeah.
Tell us about Africa.
So I lived in Guinea, West Africa.
Okay.
And yeah, the diet there is very, very rarely eat meat. Meat is something like extremely special. Mm-hmm. So much of it was, my favorite was mafeako, which was manioc leaf sauce, so cassava leaf. There was this one lady, I would go to her every single day. She was right outside of my compound where I lived. But yeah, but basically what you're saying, it's very true. Southern food is essentially a combination of West African cuisine and what they were given at the time, and then they've been able to make it very, very good. And a lot of it is so unhealthy. But over in Africa, it was very rice and vegetable heavy, and then they usually seasoned it with either fish, a lot of fish, and occasionally meat. We didn't eat a ton of meat, sometimes goat, chicken, but again, it was on very special occasions.
Wow. It's interesting. I mean, another thing that we talked about was the fact that, and this is controversial, and we might make a lot of enemies, but if the entire world were to be vegetarian, I mean, if you think about it, if the entire world were to go vegetarian, it would be amazing.
Yeah, not even vegan. Just imagine if everyone went vegetarian. That'd be so good for animals. It'd be so good for the environment. And I know people are going to be like, oh, well, veal, dairy industry.
Right. But I think the dairy industry, I think in some ways the dairy industry is an extension of the beef industry.
And just the factory farming. Mm-hmm. If you have dairy cows, and some dairy cows are treated very, very well. I'm not advocating drinking milk, but it's just the way we have developed the processing of beef and chicken, it's spilled over into how we milk cows and how we treat the cows. So I don't know, if the whole world was vegetarian, I'd like to believe that we would treat dairy animals much, much better off.
Yeah, I imagine. I don't see the whole world going vegetarian and eating cheese. I don't see cheese becoming the meat replacement because it's so bad for you, right? That's not a hard sell.
Can't make a meal on cheese. Well, cheese pizza.
But I think, and even cheese, if you look at the idea of cheese, especially in the United States, that cheese, there's been cheese, right, and French and all of these things, and there are people who've been making cheese for centuries. But this idea, the rise in the consumption of cheese was balanced against the decrease in whole milk consumption. So people started eating skim milk, and they had to do something with all that they were skimming from the milk,
yeah.
And so there was this big push to get people eating more cheese.
Oh, yeah, and they were just put cheese on. It's the reason we have cheese on everything.
So is that all? What else did we want to talk about? Did we touch on all those things? There were some things that I felt like you were pretty passionate about.
Food. I like food.
He talks about, so Ryan's channel is really all about the food, and I do hope that you will check him out at Hot Vegan Eats. I will include information on his channel in the description box below. I don't want to make a big thing of it, but I promise you guys this is going to be the last white man that I'm going to be featuring on my channel for at least 6 months. But anyway, that said, he's a really great guy, and I'm really happy to have gotten to Columbus and a chance to say hello to another vegan YouTube content creator. Anything else you want to say before we say goodbye, Ryan?
No, I'd love if you guys check out my channel. Again, it's Hot Vegan Eats. It's all just cooking recipes and whatnot. I'm going to have a video with Reg talking about our food.
Yeah, so you're going to go over to his channel and check out that part of our meeting. That's it for this video. Like it if you like it. Share, comment, subscribe. This is Reg.
And Ryne.
Signing off. Love yourself. Peace.
And I love myself.